Hi, you guys. So I originally made this video and I posted it on YouTube and I went back and I watched it, just to make sure that it was correct and there wasn't any sound. So I'm gonna redo it for you. Let's talk about the origins of democracy in the United States. So, the foundations of our republic, of our democracy, trace all the way back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome and to the Middle Ages and medieval England. We have been talking in my ninth grade classes about those things, and um, I really have enjoyed that. And the US government has taken ideas from each one of those, and we have put our own unique spin on things, and we have made our government into what it is today. Um, Specifically, we're going to talk about how the ideas for a bicameral legislature, representative government, limited government, and individual rights come from England, and they got their ideas from ancient Greece and Rome as well. Um, they just put it into practice a lot sooner than we did in the United States. Representative government is the idea that people should have a say in their own government. Remember, bicameral means two chambers. Remember, bi means two, so there are two houses or two chambers. Limited government means that the government should be subject to limits on their use of power. Individual rights is the belief that a government should protect individuals and their rights as well as property rights. So, in oh my heavens, I've forgotten what year, but in about 1100 CE or AD, William of Saxony goes to England and he defeats the Anglo-Saxons and he creates the monarchy in England. And over time, the king has always had an advisory council, and over time that evolves to become a bicameral parliament. So remember, bicameral means two chambers, so two houses, right? So you have the House of Lords and you have the House of Commons, and that is still today the names of the legislatures in the British government and British Parliament. Now, in 1215, they wrote, it should say wrote, not published, they wrote the Magna Carta. And what happened was Parliament was irritated and tired of King John and his abuse of power. So they decide that they are going to write this document called the Magna Carta. Now, this document limits the power of the king as well as all future kings and queens. And it outlines the individual rights that they have, that the king cannot violate. The original intent was to protect the nobles, and over time it evolves to be protection for all English citizens. Now, in 1628, Parliament made Charles I signed the Petition of Right, which required monarchs to obtain Parliament's approval before they could levy new taxes. Levy new taxes means that before Charles could decide that he was going to tax the people, he had to ask Parliament's permission first. And Charles ignores all of this, and this is just one symptom of the problems that they had with Charles, and ultimately it leads to the English Civil War. Now, Charles is beheaded, and the Civil War lasts for almost 10 years. And following the English Civil War, a man by the name of Oliver Cromwell establishes a military dictatorship, and it lasted for about 10 years. When his son comes into power, he does not quite hold the control like his father, so he is overthrown by Parliament. And Parliament, they ask Charles II, who is the son of Charles I, the one that was beheaded. They ask him if he would be their king, and he accepts. And this is known as the restoration of the monarchy. So Charles ruled for about 20, 30 years, and he dies in the late 1680s. And his son, James II, is about to become the king. And if you will remember, in the late 1500s, Henry VIII decided that he would banish his wife, Catherine, his very first wife, Catherine, and his daughter, Mary. And Catherine was Catholic, and she raised her daughter, Mary, to be Catholic. And we talked about this in my ninth grade class the other day. You know, being banished with your mother is bound to have some effects on your mental well being. And when Mary comes into power, she starts to kill people who were English, who were Protestant, because her father had established the Protestant church in England, and she decides that she's just going to start killing people, and she is called the Bloody Mary. You've probably heard of her, but this happened about 100 years prior, and James II was Catholic, and that made Parliament very nervous because the last Catholic monarch they had killed a bunch of people. That was Mary, right? She killed a bunch of people for being Protestant, and that was something that made them very, very nervous. So Parliament withdraws their support from James, and they consult with his daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange, and they ask them if they would like to be the king and queen of England, and they accept. And so before they are allowed to become the king and queen, Parliament forces them to sign the English Bill of Rights. And this happens in 1689. And the English Bill of Rights is extremely important because it is a document that the United States uses to base their own Bill of Rights. There are some Bill of Rights that are almost identically word for word that we get from the English Bill of Rights. And so this is an extremely important document. It states the powers and the rights that Parliament itself has, and it limits the powers of the monarchy. And this is extremely important as well, because up until this point, the monarchy has been an absolute monarchy. You'll remember that an absolute monarchy means that the king or queen can do whatever they want to do because they have absolute power. With the writing and the signing of the English Bill of Rights, we have the establishment of constitutional monarchy in England, which means that the king and queen cannot do whatever they want anymore. They are limited in their power. They're limited by the English Bill of Rights. This is very important, and England still has a constitutional monarchy to this day. So this is an extremely important document to both the United States and to the English. So we talked about England, so let's talk about the New World, okay? In the 1600s, there were men and women who come to the United States, to the New World. The Puritans and the Pilgrims, specifically. We associate the Pilgrims with those who had the first Thanksgiving. We associate the Puritans with the Salem witch trials. Those are two different groups of people, and if you have questions about that, send me an email, right? And from the very beginning, there have been attempts to have unity and examples of government from the very beginning. In 1619, in Virginia, in Jamestown, they established the House of Burgesses so that they can govern themselves. In 1620, the Mayflower Compact is signed. That's the Pilgrims, right? When they came over, they were originally supposed to be in Virginia, and they ended up in Massachusetts. And so they write the Mayflower Compact, and that establishes their government. 1639, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut are written, which are a set of laws that limit the power of the government, and give all free men the right to choose who can serve in the community as a judge. 1641, the Massachusetts Body of Liberties is written, and this is the first law code that is in New England, and it protected the individual rights of citizens. Now, you've heard this before, but let's do a quick review of it. There were three types of colonies that were established. You have proprietary, royal, and charter. Proprietary, think proprietary money. The king would grant a piece of land to an individual or to a group who would promise to pay for the starting of a colony. Now, 9 of the original colonies were proprietary colonies. Virginia would be an example of a proprietary colony because the Jamestown group got together and they created a colony where they can go and they can make money. There were royal colonies as well. They were directly controlled by the king, and they were directly controlled by the king with a governor that the king chose. And the governor would come and they would rule in the government. They generally had 2 house legislatures that the people could vote on, but remember that ultimately the governor is the one who is running the government. Now, 10 of the colonies were royal colonies by the mid-1700s, and that's going to be important when we get to the time of the ending of salutary neglect, which I discuss in a later video. All right, and the last is the charter colony, where there is a charter that's written. A charter is a contract, and the king must agree to it, and the colony must agree to it, and they must abide by that contract. By the time of the American Revolution, only Connecticut and Rhode Island were left as charter colonies. There were several colonies that began as charter colonies, but by the time of the Revolution, only Rhode Island and Connecticut were charter colonies. So here are the colonies in 1750. Now, the southern colonies include Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. The middle colonies include Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. The New England colonies include Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Now remember, when we discuss Massachusetts in the colonies at this time period, you have the original land, right, that Massachusetts is today, but you also have this piece of land up here in what we call Maine today. That was a part of Massachusetts as well. All right, so there were some intellectual influences that influenced the colonists and the framers. One of those is republicanism. And this is the broad set of ideas about representative government that can be traced back to Greece and to Rome. Think the Roman Republic and republicanism. Republican thinking highly values citizen participation, the public good, and civic virtue, which is the idea that people should place the common good over their own private interest. Machiavelli is the author of The Prince, which is a very fascinating book you should check out for funsies about politics. He puts forth the theory that a republic should be based on civic virtue. Montesquieu is the person who suggested that there should be a separation of powers, that the government should be divided into branches of government. And for the United States, we have the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branches. Framers also benefited from the Protestant Reformation, which is something that we're talking about in my ninth grade class right now. The Protestant Reformation was a 16th century Christian reform movement whose leaders developed ideas about individual responsibility, the freedom to worship as one chooses, and self-government. In addition, you have Thomas Hobbes. We've talked about him before and about his ideas about social contract theory. We've also talked about John Locke, his ideas about social theory, as well as the idea of natural rights, which we will see as we move on into other lessons. You also have Rousseau, who also discusses social theory. And then you have Adam Smith. He is important because he writes The Wealth of Nations, and that influences the way that the framers develop the economy here in the US. Voltaire wrote in defense of civil liberties, such as freedom of speech and religion. And last but not least, you have William Blackstone, who wrote commentaries on the laws of England, which is an overview of English law, which will be important to the framers as they are trying to craft the laws in the United States. All right, so in the next video, we will begin to discuss the American independence movement. So I hope that you will check that video out, and I hope this has been helpful in you studying for the test.